I welcome you back to our continuing study in the Gospel of Matthew. I thank you for taking time out of your busy life and busy day to spend a few moments studying the scripture. We are going to be looking at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14. I will be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. This is one of these pocket Bibles that you cannot read if you are like me with glasses on. Matthew chapter 20 and verse 14 says, "And this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Let us put it this way. Some of the wild speculation about the end of time in the church is about our safety and security as a church. What we are doing when we practice this is longing for our safety in a very troubled world. You see, I think at its core, a lot of what goes on in the guise of speculation about eschatology and the end of age in the church is a cry for security and peace so that we can be the church in this world without all sorts of trouble. I do not mean it quite the way it may sound, but let me put it this way. I think God is not all that concerned that the church exists in a setting of peace and security. You see, God did not create the church to be held in reserve. God created the church to be on the front line. If you are on the front line, you will be vulnerable. I think, secondly, the church is always in danger of seeing itself from where it is and not where it should be. We can look around and see the ministries we are doing, or we can see the churches that have been built. We can look at our part of the world with contentment. Let Jesus take the church home, for we have done all that we can in this part of the world. Our work is finished. Let us kick up our heels. We are done. You see, we are looking at our world and not the greater world. We are not seeing what needs to be done in various parts of the world, areas where the church is weak or non existent. In Acts chapter 1 and verse 6, we have the apostles asking Jesus if he was going to restore the kingdom at this time. Think of that for a moment. This is Acts chapter 1. If what they asked came to pass, the book of Acts would only be one chapter. The apostles turn around and look at themselves and look at the situation and say, you know what, Jesus, it's time to establish your kingdom. We don't have yet the reaching out of the church to the Samaritans. And before the Samaritans, the Hellenistic Jews, the Samaritans, the God-fearers, the Gentiles. We don't have the church going forth in all of the Roman Empire. Remember, the book of Acts closes in Acts chapter 28 in the city of Rome. And so Luke seems to give us a symbolic picture of the church marching forward to all groups and to all the empire. In other words, in Acts chapter 1, verse 6, they are saying, Jesus, restore your kingdom. We're ready to see good times roll. And what they could not see and could not get is the work had basically just started. Go back to our first paragraph. The church looks around at us and says, you know what? We are good enough. We don't want to endure the difficult times. We want things as is. They were not prepared, as it were, for what it would cost to take the church and go forward. I think, secondly, they could turn around and look at themselves and think that all that needed to be done in terms of the work of the church was done. And you see, I think those are two traps of ministry, and then there is a third, which is the failure of the church and of us as Christians to see that it's not always about the accomplishment of a task. That what God through Jesus Christ has called us to is a journey. And this is true for individuals, and in our case, we're talking of the church. Part of how we grow and develop as individuals and churches is through the journey. It's not just about the task, it is through the journey that our faith is challenged, it grows and develops, and we become the people we need to be as we allow God to work in us. Excuse me. The ultimate test of when the end is that the message of the church has gone forth into all the world. Now, the challenge in all of this is what is meant by the message going forth into all the world. Some would say, well, we've got radio that broadcasts the gospel into all the world. Well, it could be. I'm not really convinced because radio has limitations, right? Radio only works as you have people speaking a language. There are a number of languages that are quite small. And in some cases, they may not even have radios. So no, I don't think that is. It could be argued that because we have multiple translations of the scripture that the work has gone forth. I think that's a little closer to home because there is something special and unique when a people have the scripture in their own language. And it allows God to be, as it were, be one with them because God enters into their culture through that language. I think that's important. But that's not enough in and of itself. I think the key for me when I look at it, and I know I could be wrong, but my gut says to me that the message goes forth when the church is built around the world. Now, what that means is not necessarily a building with a steeple on every corner in every village, because I understand that the church is more than the building. But to have the message go forth means that there are bodies of believers in every tribe, every language, every nation. That's what we're looking forward to. And that kind of, to me, is a criteria by which we can begin to anticipate the end of the ages. Now, I'm not saying I'm right on this. I'm just saying that seems to me what our focus needs to be. Not on whether the world is going to pot. That will happen. What we need to focus on is the message going forward. So let's anticipate Jesus coming again in power and might to establish his kingdom forevermore.